The art of fortification in the medieval world was both a science and an expression of human ingenuity, shaped by necessity and the constant struggle for survival in an age where power was measured by the strength of walls as much as by armies in the field. At the heart of defensive architecture stood the concentric castle, a revolutionary design that layered multiple rings of walls, towers, and barriers in such a way that an enemy, even if they managed to breach the first defensive perimeter, would immediately face yet another obstacle, often higher and stronger than the one before. This principle of defense in depth made such fortresses exceedingly difficult to conquer, as attackers found themselves caught between walls while under a rain of arrows, stones, and boiling substances poured from murder holes and battlements. These castles were not placed randomly, but carefully integrated with the natural terrain. Hills, cliffs, rivers, and marshes were deliberately chosen as natural barriers that amplified defensive potential, while passes and roads could be controlled with watchtowers or fortified outposts. Geography was as much a weapon as stone walls, and medieval lords knew well that the right location could mean the difference between survival and destruction. To reinforce their vigilance, defenders developed early warning systems that ranged from lone watchtowers with signal fires to elaborate chains of beacons and messenger networks capable of transmitting urgent news over long distances. A single fire on a hilltop could warn entire regions of an impending attack, buying precious time for defenders to prepare. Yet even the strongest castles could not withstand determined attackers indefinitely, for medieval warfare was marked by the ingenuity of siege engines. Among the most fearsome were the trebuchet and the catapult, whose mechanics combined human craftsmanship with the laws of physics. A trebuchet, powered by a massive counterweight, could hurl projectiles weighing hundreds of kilograms with astonishing precision, reducing towers and walls to rubble and spreading terror among those within. Catapults, though less powerful, were easier to construct and maintain, and were often used to rain fire, stones, or even diseased carcasses into besieged cities, turning warfare into a brutal mix of engineering and psychological assault. Siege towers, giant rolling wooden structures, were designed to protect soldiers as they approached walls, allowing them to climb ladders to directly assault the battlements. Yet these towers were vulnerable. Defenders set them ablaze with fire arrows or hurled stones to shatter them, and many attackers met their deaths trapped inside their own machines. Perhaps the most insidious tactic of all was undermining, the practice of digging tunnels beneath walls, supporting them with wooden beams, and then setting fire to the beams to collapse the structure. Entire fortifications could be brought down through these subterranean wars, leaving breaches that no garrison could easily repair. Still, medieval warfare was not merely a contest of technology, but above all of human endurance. Sieges often dragged on for months or even years, testing the limits of both besiegers and besieged. Inside the walls, defenders lived in cramped, disease-ridden conditions, rationing food and water as famine and illness spread. Starvation was a weapon as effective as any sword, forcing populations to consume horses, dogs, or even worse, in desperate attempts to survive. Outside the walls, besieging armies faced their own hardships. Camp life brought epidemics, exhaustion, and constant exposure to the elements. Entire campaigns could collapse when a disease swept through an army before a single breach had been made. Morale, therefore, was decisive. When spirits faltered, surrender or retreat often followed. Medieval commanders were acutely aware of this and developed psychological tactics to weaken the enemy. Propaganda, false promises of mercy, staged executions, and even elaborate shows of strength were employed to intimidate defenders into submission. At times, deception achieved what brute force could not, with gates opened from within after a well-crafted bribe or a false rumor spread to sow confusion. Beyond the walls, the question of supply lines loomed large over every siege. Armies required immense amounts of grain, meat, water, weapons, and fodder for animals, and maintaining this constant flow of resources was essential. To cut an enemy's supplies was to cut their lifeline, and clever use of ambushes, scorched earth tactics, or naval blockades could turn the tide of a siege without a single stone being thrown. The economic strain of prolonged sieges weighed heavily on kingdoms, draining treasuries, exhausting populations, and diverting men and resources from other fronts. Many rulers discovered that sustaining a siege for too long risked political instability at home as much as defeat in the field. The legacy of siege warfare is deeply etched into history, for the fall or survival of a single stronghold could decide the fate of nations. Great cities such as Constantinople, Jerusalem, and Antioch became symbols of resilience or conquest, their sieges echoing across centuries. Failed sieges, on the other hand, weakened empires, emboldened enemies, and altered the balance of power. Defensive architecture itself evolved in response to the relentless ingenuity of attackers. Castles grew stronger, their walls thicker and angled to deflect missiles. Towers became rounded to resist bombardment, and moats and drawbridges and fortified gatehouses added new layers of security. These lessons did not vanish with the end of the medieval age, but informed the fortifications of the Renaissance and even the great star forts of the gunpowder era. Remarkably, the principles of logistics, morale, deception, and psychological pressure still find echoes in modern military strategy. From blockades in naval warfare to the cutting of supply chains in contemporary conflicts, the medieval art of siege continues to shape our understanding of war, proving that while the weapons may change, the struggle for endurance, control, and survival remains timeless.